Hello Super Saiyans, I'm Andrew and I'm honestly having such a hard time telling the difference between Dragon Ball FighterZ and the anime.
No, don't Frieza! Goku!
They look pretty much the same. It's actually a really awesome achievement and it's shaping up to be yet another awesome video game set in Akira Toriyama's much beloved world. But I can still remember the days when Dragon Ball Media wasn't even guaranteed to get a US release. There were 23 Dragon Ball games released in Japan and Europe before a single one was even localized for America. And that was a crappy PS1 fighter based on GT. And we don't talk about GT here. But it got me thinking about the franchise's long journey to the States and how it became the gateway drug that introduced a whole generation of American fans to the awesomeness that is anime. This time on Now This Nerd, we're taking a look at how Dragon Ball Z won the West. But first, we need to talk about the reason why the journey was so goddamn difficult in the first place. We have to start at the beginning. With Toriyama's original manga. His first hit was called Dr. Slump, and it was heavily influenced by West Coast US culture. But for his 1984 follow-up, he wanted to incorporate more of an Asian aesthetic. That's why he based Dragon Ball on a 16th century Chinese novel called Journey to the West. That, and the book was public domain, so he wouldn't have to pay for the rights. Real smart. Dragon Ball is an extremely loose adaptation of the novel, but it does include a little monkey man who kicks ass and rides around on a Nimbus cloud. Using Journey to the West as a template allowed Toriyama to explore a setting that hadn't been done a lot in manga before. The Chinese influence is everywhere, right down to the color of Goku's gi, which was inspired by the robes of Buddhist monks. On top of that, Toriyama added plenty of influence from his native Japan and his own oddball sense of humor.
I'm done.
So basically, we're talking about a Chinese story filtered through Japanese culture by a creator who happens to be a pretty weird guy. There are some very deep cultural differences.
Yes, I see. You have two balls. They're very important and they're hidden in your clothes.
Huh? Oh, wow. She's right again, guys.
Young man, may I see them, please?
Well, I guess so. Why not?
And a lot of the jokes don't really translate well to Western audiences. This made it a hard sell to broadcasters, and it took a while for Dragon Ball to finally make it to the States. But once it arrived, it opened the floodgates for anime in America. Let's look at the early efforts to bring Dragon Ball to the West. The first piece of Dragon Ball media to make it over here was actually an NES game from 1988, although you wouldn't know it even if you bought it. That's because it was stripped of the license before it came over here. In Japan, the manga and the Dragon Ball anime had become a big sensation, which of course led to a flood of pretty crappy 8-bit games, including Dragon Ball. Bandai brought it to the US in 1988, even though Dragon Ball hadn't officially reached us yet. They removed the IP, slapped on a horrendous translation, and renamed it Dragon Power. The characters have different sprites, and things like the Dragon Balls are changed to the Crystal Balls. It's also the first, but definitely not the last time, Master Roshi's obsession with women's underwear would be lost in translation.
One of the power-ups is like a pair of boneless panties.
Of course it is.
They flipped the sprite upside down and turned it into a sandwich.
Americans got their first taste of the anime the very next year, with an extremely rare 1989 localization called The Lost Dub.
So, little one, you're here to kill me and steal my shell, are you?
Only about 5 episodes aired in test markets across the country, and it was immediately canceled. They changed a few names, but overall it was a pretty faithful translation, with only mild censorship compared to the later DBZ dubs. The straightforward approach might have been just too weird for the US audience. You gotta remember, this is the original Dragon Ball anime, when Goku was a kid and there was no Z. There was a lot less alien fighting and a lot more nudity. 6 years later, Funimation snagged the rights and brought over the first 13 episodes, which again proceeded to bomb. Funimation knew the long-running anime had huge potential, so in a last-ditch move, they threw a Hail Mary and skipped to the part that was better suited for the US market. They decided to give up on the first goofier show and jump ahead to the sequel series, which had a fully grown, jacked up Goku, way more actions, lasers, explosions, and giant monkeys, and epic sagas that stick with us for life. Dragon Ball Z. The Z fighters were a way easier sell for US audiences. Think G.I. Joes, but they were flying around and beating the shit out of each other. But with more eyes on the show, it had to meet some strict broadcast standards. Funimation was working with Saban for distribution. They're the same company that just imported Power Rangers and brought a ton of scrutiny to violence in kids' TV. They chopped DBZ down to the bone, and by the time they were through, they cut out 14 episodes worth of material. For example, a lot of the pervier stuff had to just go, and Lord knows I don't miss it. But changing Master Roshi's beer into a frothy mug of blue water seems a little excessive. Saban also felt that the original Japanese score was too quiet for Western animation standards, so they replaced the music with the iconic Dragon Rock soundtrack, which conveniently allowed them to collect royalties. Dragon Ball Z. It's never about your idea of fun, your dreams, your goals, or even your favorite characters. It's all about collecting those royalties, baby! It's all about the money! But the most egregious alterations are the cuts to violence. Like, okay, you ever notice how no one dies on Dragon Ball Z? You'll get destroyed, maybe, or, my favorite, sent to another dimension. Censoring dialogue is one thing, but there were even more intrusive edits to the animation. They redrew frames, erased blood, and reattached decapitated heads. They even superimposed big white stars when characters got punched in the face in a show where literally the entire appeal is people punching each other in the fucking face. Dragon Ball Z only managed a cult following when it aired in syndication, and Funimation pulled the plug after just 2 seasons. This could have easily been the end for DBZ in America. After several failed attempts, it seemed like the show just didn't appeal to US audiences. But, as we learned, on August 31st, 1998, Dragon Ball Z just needed to find the right home. That's the day DBZ first aired on Cartoon Network's extremely influential action block, Toonami. Toonami was one of the first mainstream showcases for anime in the US, and once DBZ took its rightful place on weekday afternoons, it became an essential part of the after-school routine for millions of American kids, me included. Ratings went through the roof, and Funimation revived the localization to bring the rest of the series over. Without Saban's help, they couldn't afford the same voice actors, but the cheaper cast gradually came into its own, and the censorship decreased as the show went on. This has, of course, sparked endless arguments over which dub is superior. Is your preferred Goku voiced by Sean Schemmel?
Okay. See, first, I have to go Super Saiyan.
Or are you a fan of Peter Kalamis?
That's definitely no illusion technique. I couldn't trace his energy when he disappeared.
Of course, if you're a purist, you could always go with Masako Nozawa, the woman who's done his voice in Japan since the very beginning. Today, you got options. You can track down whatever version of the show you want, from old dubs to fan subs, and if you're a sucker for tradition, Dragon Ball is still airing on Toonami today. Only now, it's earned the right to be uncut. Despite all odds, Dragon Ball has successfully made the leap to the US without sacrificing the intensity or the quirkiness that made it unique in the first place. Believe me, we've seen what that looks like. The 2009 Dragon Ball Evolution movie was a disastrous attempt to sanitize the series for American tastes, and it was such an insult to the fans that the screenwriter offered a heartfelt apology years later. We don't just love dudes floating in deserts screaming at each other. We love the style of Dragon Ball Z, and we love the characters of Dragon Ball Z, and that's why I appreciate Dragon Ball FighterZ and its impressive dedication to the show's aesthetic. It literally looks like you're playing the cartoon. It's fantastic. You don't have to change anything about Dragon Ball Z to win the hearts of Western audiences. By introducing anime to me and millions of other fans, Dragon Ball Z changed us, and there's no going back now. People of YouTube, lend me your strength. I need to know how you got into the Dragon Ball anime. Was it Toonami? One of the video games that you watched your otaku friends imported VHS tapes? Tell me in the comments. Please subscribe to NowThis Nerd and help me obliterate boo!